This story happened to me back when I lived with my parents. I was commuting at college at the time and had 3 siblings that also lived at home. My brother and 2 sisters. For some context, we lived on 5 acres in Royal, Ohio, surrounded on both sides by woods and farm fields. Additionally, during the week, my dad normally left for work at 2 a.m., so I had always felt like it was my job to be the man of the house, because he was gone during the times when you would imagine something sketchy happening. However, on this night, because it was the weekend, my dad was home. I woke to the sound of my brother's voice trying to get my attention. We had separate rooms. Upstairs, and coming out of your room, you could look down over the banister and see the front door. When I woke up, it took a few moments to get out of the haze and realize what was going on. I looked at the clock. It was around 2:30 a.m., and my brother told me there were 2 men at our front door. Of course, now this is a real wake-up call. We quietly walk out of my room and peek over to look down at the front door. When we looked, there was no one at the door, but I noticed my parents off to the side, out of view, the glass on the front door. I whispered down to my dad, and he told me there were 2 guys who had been talking to each other and knocking on the door. Hearing my dad say this freaked me out even more. I went back into my room and grabbed my pistol, quickly shuffling down the stairs after looking to make sure they weren't out the door. If they had been, they would have easily seen me coming down the stairs, as it is in direct view of the door. My brother is right behind me, as we head over to where my parents are, whispering to try to find out what is going on. My parents had woken up to our dog barking and come out to see these 2 men knocking loudly at the door. At this point, we see the men return and begin knocking again, despite the fact that no one had come to the door and our dog is still actively barking. The fact that they were still here at the time, in a location where houses are spread out hundreds of yards, and still knocking while the dog was barking, made the situation even more terrifying. After a couple minutes, the men walk away, and we all shuffle across the kitchen into the family room and peek out the windows into our driveway, which is lit up by our outside light. There was a black Cadillac sitting there, but no one was inside it from what we could see. Immediately the question was, where did the guys go? They weren't in their car, and they were no longer at the front door. Unfortunately, we figured out the answer when the handles to our back doors started jiggling. They were actively trying to enter the back of our house and enter the kitchen. At this point, I just remember my mom frantically saying, "David!" as pure terror overwhelmed her. At this point, 2 things happened. Adrenaline filled my body as I prepared my handgun, horrified at the very real possibility that I might have to shoot these men. Secondly, my dad grabbed the phone and called the police and calmly told them what was happening. Thankfully, after a minute of jiggling, they stopped at the back door and disappeared again, only returned to their knocking at the front. However, at this point, several minutes had gone by, and suddenly we saw the local police fly up with multiple cruisers with their lights on. As they whipped into our driveway and front yard, the 2 men bolted away, attempting to run the long way around the house across the driveway. One of them disappeared out of view, but the other one was intercepted by officer, yelling for him to get on the ground. He didn't, and he was immediately tased and fell on the ground. Some of the officers went around the house after the other guy and one of them come to talk to my dad and I as we were out front. They ended up finding the other man hiding in my little sister's playhouse in the backyard. It appears that both of them were drunk and or high, as the one who hid had cocaine on him. While they were both arrested that night, we never did find out what they were charged with or what happened with them. Needless to say, the whole experience wasn't fun. So, random men at our door in the middle of the night? Let's not meet again.
The old woman in the cinema thought I was a demon. Quite an odd title, I know, but this is the only way I can describe what she meant. This happened a few years ago, right before the pandemic hit. I remember the exact date because it spooked me to my core. It was February 18th, 2020. I was 14 years old then, so you can imagine this was a pretty frightening moment for a young girl. My mother, younger brother, and I went to see a movie. He wanted to see the new Sonic film, and I didn't really want to, so I went to see the Birds of Prey movie with Harley Quinn instead. I had already seen this movie, but I wanted to enjoy the cinema popcorn and hot dog, and quite frankly, wanted to watch it again. I had gone off by myself to the viewing room, and it was completely empty. It was just me in there, so I felt relatively safe being able to see the whole room, given I was at the very top. It's pretty amazing having an entire room to yourself, until it's not. About halfway through the film, I went to the restroom. The soda didn't last long. Once again, it was just me in there, alone. Every room was in current running progress, so nobody wanted to miss the films. As I was finishing up, there was an elderly woman at the sink, about 70. I thought I was alone, but I suppose not. She was washing her hands right next to me. She had moved from her original spot. Now, before I say what she said to me, I'll give you a brief description of myself. I have black hair, green eyes, relatively sharp features, high cheekbones, and arched brows. Yeah, a typical Disney villain, which I somewhat blame for her response. I think I'm somewhat attractive, but nothing to lose your marbles over. She looked at me with the most subtle but unnerving grin, still with her hands under the water, but not doing anything, and said, "Young lady, you are quite a gorgeous girl." I said thank you, and she went on to say, "A beauty like that is only something an evil thing can have. Your eyes are just so hollow and soulless," she continued with that same damn smile. I was seriously starting to get creeped out, but I do live in the Bible Belt of Texas, so I chalked it up to her being a nut job. But then, she got closer and said, without the smile, "You shouldn't have that beauty." I hurried and left as soon as I possibly could. I did not like being alone with that woman anymore, and I waited outside the restroom, where it was populated. But she never came out. After 5 minutes, I went back to the viewing room and was paranoid for the rest of the film. I could not get that crazy lady out of my head. Like, who says that to a kid? I seriously considered getting exorcised by a priest after that encounter. After that, I told my mother, and she didn't let me go alone until I was at least 16. Never do I want to see that woman again. I still get paranoid anytime I'm alone in a public restroom. In fact, I avoid them altogether. I still don't know what to make of it.